And welcome back, everyone, to the Pokemon Team Creation Series. From Seth Xenofighter Official, we have what is the Pokemon team of, and I've never actually heard this character's name pronounced, so if I mispronounce it, I apologize. Uh, Luz, or Lulz, no, that's not Lulz. Luz Noceda? Is that her proper name? Let me know. From Owl House. A series that I've heard is pretty good, but I've never watched. But beyond that, it's a series where I can definitely work with a team here. Luz became a pretty powerful spellcaster. Her ability, specific magic style, was Glyphs. And she had a personality varied enough that I could do something with. And I think when you have a character who has a specialty type of magic that deals with specific like ruins or gifts or glyphs that do specific things, why not make a team that kind of goes off of that? So luckily there were enough types of glyphs that we could work with it. So let's just get started here, shall we? One of her glyphs was a fire type glyph. So I knew a fire type had to be on the team. And her starter, I think it makes the most sense to use Delphox, which is basically designed after a witch mage kind of character. It also makes sense that even though it's a wand that Delphox has, it's long enough to be considered more of a staff than a wand. And Luz definitely had a staff over a wand later on in the series as her like magical weapon. So Delphox being a magical spellcaster type Pokemon, and a Pokemon, I think gets a bum rap. Fire Psychic is not a very common type, and I honestly think the design maybe could have just been done a little bit better, but I think overall it's still a solid Pokemon. I've used Delphox before. I like Delphox. So I don't know. I just feel like it gets a little bit of a bum rap. Then we had one that was difficult to figure out. Light glyphs. This allowed for, spoilers, the ability to use light-based magic, like orbs of light, energy beam of light, or like little flashes of light, light up a room, that kind of thing. Light in Pokemon usually is used like fairy type is usually kind of like used as the de facto light type. This is just due to the fact that we have a dark type but not a light type, and then fairy type came and it's strong against light or dark. So that generally kind of that was the general feel of things. However, when looking at all the fairies, none of them really seem to work well for a light glyph. So then I moved to the only other thing I could think of that isn't fire, electricity, because electricity also produces light as well. And that's one where I felt I could actually work with something. I ultimately landed on Heliolisk, because when it like does its giant frill, it basically has this circular light-based frill. So you could make the argument that acts as a glyph. It also is capable of learning several different like electric type moves that could work as light-based attacks as well. So I felt that worked. Then we have the ice glyph, which for me was cryogonal. It's literally almost like a giant glyph itself. It's a giant sentient snowflake, but it works, I think, in context for this as a giant glyph. Last main glyph she had was plant-based glyphs. Now that means I needed a grass type mon. And I'm like, I was really struggling to remember mon that literally can make plant life grow. Technically speaking, any one of them can, but there are specific Pokemon that actually can induce growth in plant life. I decided ultimately to go with Meganium. One, it's got the giant flower petal, can look like a giant glyph. Two, is one of the mon that is capable of actually causing plants to grow to a certain degree. It is capable of like revitalizing like plant life, things along those lines. Now beyond that though, what else could I do? Well, she does have the magic to turn invisible, so I knew Kecleon had to be on the list there. It's one of the only mon that really has an effective invisibility technique. I could have also gone Latios, but for some reason that didn't feel right, unfortunately. Those mons obviously can also turn invisible, as can Mew too. Last but not least, though, she's an avid painter. Now, there are two mon I could have done for that. I could have gone Grafai. I decided to go Smeargle, which, honestly, I think actually works better because Smeargle's main move that it only learns is Sketch, which allows it to learn any move, basically. It just doesn't have very strong stats. I've used the Smeargle before. They are fun to use, and they can have a very powerful moveset. If you know how to stack them right. And as well as, usually I think they're used more like as supporters learning because they can learn anything. Because with Sketch, you literally could you have the argument where you can learn just put any move under their belt and they could learn it. You could put them up against a legendary. Like say Dialga's Roar of Time, then you throw Smeargle in, you Sketch the Roar of Time during its downside period, and it's now learned Roar of Time. That's how weird but awesome Smeargles are. They just have a really crappy stats. But that being said, the question, as always, is how balanced is this team? And honestly, it's not a really unbalanced team there all that much. It's a fire. 2 mana on this team are weak to fire. Can't do anything about that. 2 mana on this team are weak to ground. Can't do much about that. 2 mana on this team are weak to rock. 2 mana, can't do much against that. By that would be Meganium and Cryogonal. Cryogonal and Delphox and Heliolisk and Cryogonal and Delphox, respectively. Unfortunately, this is just another team, and these have been coming up lately, that just gets completely decimated by fighting types. 2/3 of this team just gets completely wrecked. The only mon on this team that don't have a strict weakness to fighting are Delphox and Meganium, and that's it. Now, luckily, that doesn't mean like a completely fighting-based team is going to just completely go through this team, because Delphox is also a psychic type. But it does mean that this team is going to struggle hard against fighting types. Now, that being said, though, as always, how balanced is this team? And honestly, let's just start out right now with our balance. How well does this team do to become champion? Honestly, in Kanto, the answer, I think, is actually a very comfortable yes. Because the only gym leaders or Elite Four members that you would actually struggle with in any capacity would probably be Blaine, because you've got 2 mon that are weak to psychic, and you just don't have any strong, or weak to fire, and you don't have anything strong against fire on this team. But otherwise, despite Fennekin it being a fire type, it should actually clear Brock without too much difficulty. And at that point, you can have a Heliodisc fully evolved at that point, because it's a stone evolution. So that means you're going to cleave through Misty. You'll have Cryogonal and at least Braxian at that point. So you're going to be able to deal with Surge. At that point, then you're almost going to have a fully evolved Delphox, almost. So Erica, and you have an ice type, so Erica's no problem. Koga wouldn't be much of an issue. Sabrina, frankly, isn't that much of an issue. Even though she's psychic and you have strong resistances, most of these mon have surpassed the Gen 1 level of power, so you should be fine. Blaine's the only one you really kind of struggle a little bit with, just because you have no strength against fire, and you have 2 mon that are weak to fire, but you should still be able to get through it. Giovanni, you have both a grass and an ice type, you should be fine, and none of the Elite Four are a problem, honestly, because you have both an electric and a fire type to deal with Lorelei. You've got literally a grass type to deal with the Onyxes, and quite frankly, Delphox can deal with a fighting type, no problem. The Ghost, Agatha's a little tricky, but again, Delphox being a psychic type should be able to handle the poison type part of her team. And in fact, she's really more of a poison type leader, Elite Four member anyway. And then you have Lance. Lance would be a little tricky, but Cryogonal alone should be able to handle the Dragonites. And the Dragonairs, and I think Gyarados is on that team, but you have a Heliolisk, so you'd be able to handle that. And while Blue is the most balanced member of the Elite Four, you actually shouldn't struggle that hard against him. You have enough balance, and he has no real strength against you in terms of his team. Yeah, he's got a fire type, but you can compensate with that. Like I said, Delphox alone, you'll just go 1-1 with his fire type, and you got the advantage of a psychic type. Otherwise, he doesn't really have any strength against you with his team. So while it would be a little tricky to deal with, you could definitely beat Blue. Then you go into Johto. Now, Johto is a little bit more of a maybe. You will, again, actually have no problem getting through any of the gym leaders at this point. Wagner, Bugsy, even Whitney, you shouldn't really struggle with. Again, you will have a fully evolved Mon with Heliolisk and a relatively decent Statamon with Cryogonal. God, saying that name fast is a little difficult. Granted, the rollout is a weakness to Cryogonal, but you should still be fine. Like I said, Morty, no problem. Chuck, definitely no problem. Nor Jasmine, Price, no problem. Honestly, you shouldn't even struggle with Claire. Will is not going to be a big problem either. Bruno again, Koga. Even Karen, despite being a dark type a specialist, you actually probably wouldn't struggle that much because half of her team is already weak to ice and fire anyway, because she's got a Vileplume, she's got a Murkrow. Oh god, what was the other one that's on the team? I can't quite remember what the other one on the team was, because it's Houndoom, it's Umbreon, it's Murkrow, it's Vileplume, and I'm blanking on what the other one was. It wasn't Sneasel, which even if it was, would mean that you were going to beat her ass on that. Karen, I will at least say, is probably the one you might struggle the most with of the Elite Four, but you should still be able to get through it. Because again, Smeargle, because one of the big X factors on this team is that Smeargle. If it can it will pick up moves as you get along. It's the 5th Mon you would get, so you'll have it by the time you get to Chuck. So that means you'll be able to learn a bunch of random moves. So you might be able to pick up some fighting type moves from Chuck, like Dynamic Punch, for example. You might be able to pick that up, and that would be a good way to just take down some of the air ones, even with Smeargle's low attack power. The only one you're going to really kind of have some problems with is Lance, because while Cryogonal will be able to handle the Dragonites, they are still pseudo-legendaries, and that one Cryogonal is not going to be able to take them all down. Plus, he has Charizard, which is going to be a problem for that. It will take that down. Helios can definitely deal with both the Aerodactyl and the Gyarados, no problem. Maybe even deal with the Charizard. So the real question just simply is, could the rest of this team, in theory, beat the Dragonites? And the answer to that is I think it could, but it's not a guarantee. So that's why it's a maybe for Johto, but still a maybe. Then we start to get into the no buenos, the not gonna happens. So starting off with Hoenn, right out the gate, unfortunately, I don't even think you get past Roxanne in this region, because yeah, you could still technically have Braixen at that point, but you're still going to have to deal with 3 rock types if you're dealing with Emerald and just 2. And Nose Pass is durable. So it's difficult to say. Let me put it this way. If you've got Braixen at that point, which is possible, you could have it. Like I said, I allow you to go a little above the level cap, but not more than like 2, which luckily Braixen would still be evolved at that point. I would say it's still possible you could beat him. So that one I'll give a pass. You should be able to handle Brawly, Watson, and Flannery, no problem, but Norman's a problem. Because A, it's normal types. You have no fighting type moves on this team, unless you copied something down the road with Smeargle. And so you got to deal with special attacks mostly. In fact, all of these Mon, except for maybe Kecleon, are special attackers, is the problem. And that bulk is problematic. And that Slacking, even though it's got Truon, is a beast. So that might be a little problematic, but not a deal breaker. Liza and Tate would be the next problem, because you don't have anything strong very much against psychic types either. And they're also exploiting your weakness to rock. So 2 of your heavier hitters with Cryogonal and Delphox are going down. However, you do have Meganium, whose grass type and like Razor Leaf or whatever it's going to learn would be able to handle the rock element of the Solrock and the Lunatone. The problem is, if I remember correctly, the Solrock does also have flamethrowers. So that's a bit of a problem. But still, it's still not a done deal. You might still be able to get past that. And then you should be able to handle either water version, either Juan or Wallace. But honestly, it's one of the first times that Phoebe becomes a problem for a team. Because Sydney, his dark type, it's problematic, but 2 out of 5 of them are already grass types. So even with the dark strength, you should be able to handle that, no problem, with Delphox alone. And then Cryogonal to kind of help sweep a little bit. But no, the problem, Phoebe is a problem because you actually are not in a good spot with Phoebe. Yeah, she doesn't have a lot of diversity with ghost types, but at the same time, you don't have anything strong against ghost types here. Delphox is weak to ghost, so that's, despite it having a lot of like attacks that could do stuff, and it can learn Shadow Ball. So to be fair, the fact that it can learn Shadow Ball does mean that you could get through Phoebe. But as always, it just comes down to the last two, and that's Drake and Steven. Now, ironically, I think you'd have a little bit of better time with Steven because, again, being a rock and steel type trader means that Devil Fox is able to get through a lot of those guys. Unfortunately, once the rock types come in, like, say, Armaldo or even Cray Dilly would just be neutral to fire at that point. Or say Claydol, who's a ground psychic type. At that point, you got a problem. But no, the problem as it always comes down to Hoenn is Drake. You only got one mon on this team that's strong against Dragon. And that thing is not surviving to the end. So honestly, I don't know if you'd really have a firm strategy with Drake here. Because you've got the one mon that is good against it, but a couple of those dragons have fire type moves on their team. So it doesn't look good if you're going against Drake. The ultimate problem though is there's at least, I went down the list, there's at least 5 trainers, main trainers you have to battle that are going to be a struggle for you. So I just don't think that it's likely you could become champion in this team. Just as before with Hoenn, Sinnoh, I frankly just don't think you get past Rorik. Even with an evolved Braxian, you don't, unless you get lucky with some psychic type moves or just a really strong fire move to outdo their resistance, that Cranidos alone is going to completely mess you up because he does have 3 Rockmon against your 1 Firemon. So I just don't think it's likely you're going to be able to get past Rorik. But on the off chance you did, you would actually still struggle with Maylene a little bit due to the fact that 2 of them on your team would have a weakness to fighting. But the psychic element of Braxian at that point should be able to kind of counter that. So it's struggle, but you could do it. But after that, you actually would most likely get to the Elite Four. Unfortunately, once you get the Lucian, you have no strength against psychic types. And several of them have moves and typings that you just don't have an answer for. For example, Psychic Fairy. Psychic Steel and Bronzong isn't really that big of a problem, but I believe you also got to deal with Alakazam, who I think outspeeds pretty much everything on this team. I just don't see a good avenue for victory when it comes to this. And even if you did get past her, right out the gate, Cynthia's Spiritomb, you don't have an answer for. There's no fairies on this team, so there's just no strong answer to Spiritomb. So Delphox is already going to be struggling. And yeah, so there's that. But like I said, honestly, I don't even think you get past Rorik. But what about Unova? And honestly, you can get through the entirety of the game, I think, with this team. Fennekin should be able to take out both either depending on Black and White 1 or Black and White 2. You should be able to get through either Cillian, Charon, and Cress, I think it is. You should be able to get through the Elemental Monkey Gym, no problem. And even get through, Charon is the name of your friend. And get through his normal gym. And at that point, you'll now have Heliodisc fully evolved. So even with Lenora being difficult, you should be fine. And Roxy having poison, you should be fine because you have a Psychic type move. After that, you should actually be able to clear through most of the gyms, no problem. Maybe you struggle a little bit on the earlier ones, but otherwise you should be good. It's not until you get to the Elite Four that you run into 2 really big problems. And that is the Elite Four. Now, with the Elite Four, there are 3, mind you, individuals that you're going to struggle. In fact, honestly, it's 4. All 4 of the Elite Four members are individuals who you're either going to not be able to just straight out not be able to beat, or you're going to struggle fiercely against. Let's go with the one I think you can beat, but still have a problem with, the Psychic type Elite Four member, whose names, I always forget their names, which I like Unova a lot, by the way, so it sucks I always kind of forget their names. Yeah, because you have no strength against Psychic. Granted, you have no weakness either. It's kind of a 1-in-1, so you're kind of going neutral, so you could do it. But then what about the Dark type gym leader? Well, or Elite Four member. That one's going to be a bit more of a struggle. Again, it all depends partly on what Smeargle maybe copied along the way. But the fact is, being Dark means that your Delphox is kind of useless here. But it's still not impossible. Where you're going to start to run into a problem is the Ghost and specifically the Fighting type. Because the Ghost, yeah, you have 3 mon on the team. They're actually immune to Ghost. So there's at least that benefit. But conversely, any normal type moves they have under their belt, which knowing it's Kecleon and Kecleon is going to have some normal moves. Those normal moves are negated. Plus, they all do have Sucker Punch, I believe, or a lot of those ghosts have Sucker Punch of some kind. So Delphox is probably going down hard and fast. Still not impossible, but difficult. And then there's the Fighting type Elite Four member, which they do all have Sucker Punch, which means, unfortunately, your Delphox might be able to take one down, and then you're kind of in trouble, because then the remaining 80% of your team is screwed. Especially with Smeargle's weak stats. Kecleon's not that great either. Your best Heliodisc and Cryogonal maybe could do a little bit before they go down, and Meganium at least could put up a wall and try to do its best. I really don't know if he can get past the Fighting type Elite Four member. And then that's not even bringing into the fact whether or not you can even beat the gym or the champions. Iris, I just flat out don't think you can beat. You have nothing on this team to deal with that Hydreigon except the Cryogonal, and even then, its stats are not enough to bring that Hydreigon down. And that Hydreigon, frankly, is going to just kind of mollywop a lot of that team. And if you bring it down, she's still got Mon that, frankly, Aggron alone would be able to just cleave through that Cryogonal, no problem. Once that Cryogonal's gone, you've got no good answers for anything on this team. Even Lapras resists grass because it's ice. So yeah, you're just trying to hold out as long as you can eventually. And then Alder, I will at least say there's a chance you could. Problem is, Excavalier is a lot faster than most everything on the team. Not Excavalier, sorry. Excelgor is a lot faster than everything on the team. Excavalier would go down to Delphox if Delphox is still around. Druddigon, you could take down with the Cryogonal. Vanillix, you could take down with the Delphox. Excelgor, you can also take down with the Delphox. The Buffalot, though, you have no strong answer for it. Granted, it doesn't have the best special defense, so that might be a chance. And then you really actually don't have an answer for the Volcarona. The Volcarona literally has covered, or type-wise covers everything on this team. Nothing on this team can get through the Volcarona. And it has enough, going for it, they can waste a good chunk of this team as well. So yeah, Alder is a maybe, whereas Iris is definitely a no. Then you go into Kalos, and I can tell you right now, the only gym leader you would struggle with is Karina, because she's a fighting type gym leader. You're only going to have those 3 at the beginning of the game, or that point in the game, and 2 of them just going to get clipped by fighting types. But you should also be able to have psychic abilities on your team at that point. So it's kind of balanced out. So you might be able to get through there. Otherwise, it's Mulva, the Fire Elite Four member, who's the only one Elite Four member that you would struggle with. Just because of the Fire. And her team is pretty balanced. You also don't have a good answer for Fire on this team. Because she's going to be able to take down the Cryogonal and the Meganium. She has both Torkoal, Talonflame. I'm trying to remember everything that was on the team, right? Oh, Pyroar's on the team. So it's not impossible, but difficult, Mulva. The other 3, surprisingly, not that difficult. You have enough coverage for water types. You have enough, definitely for water types. Steel types, you should be fine. Delphox should be able to take care of most of them. And even with the Dragon, Cryogonal should at least be able to take down the Noivern and maybe the Dragon Algae. But then Diantha comes in, and Hawlucha you should be able to handle, but then Tyranitar comes in. And unfortunately, being Rock Dragon means that it's, if I'm not mistaken, Rock does resist ice. It's strong against ice. I think it also does resist. So you're already now in trouble, because if Delphox goes down, which eventually it would, because it's that unless you're switching out, you have no strength against that. And if the Cryogonal goes, then you have no answer for the Goodra later on. And that's not to forget that she also has a Mega Gardevoir on the team. So no, I don't think you could beat Diantha. Right out the gate with Galar, I'm going to say no, because once you get to Kofu, you don't have a good answer for anything. The Cryogonal's going to go down pretty hard, pretty quick. The Heliolisk is only going to have so much power, and Fire is just neutral. So, and your Psychic type moves aren't going to be very good against Bug. But it's not the end of the world. But the problem then after that is Gordy, the rock type gym leader, you were in trouble against. Then you got Piers, his dark type gym, you actually aren't that good against. Raihan, yeah, he's got ground, but he's also got dragon, and honestly, that Krognall's probably not going to last very long. Frankly, dealing with this whole system is a little problematic, but you could maybe get past the gym leaders, but once Leon comes in, Delphox can handle the Aegislash no problem for a change. The Aegislash is not a problem. It's once you deal with Dragapult that again, I keep bringing it up, that really should have been his ace, not Charizard. Because then you could have maybe given it a Gigantamax, like turn it into like an aircraft carrier, which it kind of already is. That would have been kind of cool. Like a helicarrier. But point being is that thing's so fast and powerful and has coverage for everything on this team. It knows Flamethrower. That alone would be able to take out the Krognall and the Meganium. It also has Ghost type move. It also has Dragon type moves. It also has Electric type moves. So unfortunately, Delphox probably isn't going to be able to put this thing down. And even if it does, but it goes down with you, that Haxorus then is going to Dragon Dance and start just wreaking havoc on this team. And then you get into all the others on the team that are kind of swapped in depending on what he chose. So yeah, Leon's no-go. Finally, and last but not least, we've got Paldea. And surprisingly, for a change, you can actually get past, without any difficulty. In fact, you don't struggle with a gym leader until you get to Rhyme. And this is just because Rhyme is a ghost type gym leader. Now, that being said, you're actually immune to ghost type moves with half of this team. So it's difficult, but I think you can manage. Tulip is another one where you don't have a real strong advantage over, but it's not like it's impossible to beat her. And you should be able to deal with Grusha, no problem. But Rika, you got nothing for. The only thing, that's not true. Rika is you struggle with, but Meganium and Krognall should be able to kind of manage a little bit. It's once you get to Hassel that you run into a big problem. Because once again, the only thing you have on this team that is capable of dealing with dragons is Krognall. And he has an ice dragon, which means he can just negate the ice weakness you have, or he has, just by throwing that out there. And unfortunately, being an ice dragon doesn't mean you're going to be weak to fire, because fire is resisted by dragon. Even if you were able to get all the way to Gita's team is so weird that I just don't know if you could, because Veluza would be able to counter Delphox. Its stats aren't as great, but it's still able to counter Delphox psychic or fire type moves. And then eventually King Gambit. If King Gambit comes out and you've already lost Delphox, you're screwed. You have nothing on this team that would be able to do a lot of damage to that thing. And even if you could, you're going to lose a lot of that team before you're able to take it down. So I do not think you can become champion of Paldea here. I think I think you could do it in Kanto. There's a solid chance you could do it in Johto, but it's not a guarantee. There's also a chance you could do it in Unova with Alder, but that's not a guarantee either. Ultimately, though, that's my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Do you like this team? Do you dislike this team? Let me know in the comments below. But until then, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.